Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, April 28th, 2022. Time for another show. My goodness. All right, trying to keep up with things here. Hectic morning at the bus depot, otherwise known as the house today, dispatching kids off to school. But everything seems to be working after all, so great. Glad to have trusted in the equipment and the people behind it. Thanks, Justice, for the thumbs up. Lots happening today and this morning. Not that I could think of any of it last night. I left the Morning Post until way late, and I was just basically too tired to think up anything fun and interesting and clever to highlight for today's show. But doesn't matter. The material is going to be there, even if I refuse to face the microphone when discussing it. I don't know. I'm looking around here for some extra items that I need to get things started. Hasn't happened so far. But at any rate, lots to catch up on. I guess we're going to have to spend some time on word that comes down today that Donald J. Rambo Trump feared being pelted with dangerous fruit at actually one of his own rallies, which is kind of an interesting thing. But we're finally getting word of what went on in the deposition. Here's what's happening. The deposition in one of the many lawsuits against him for instructing the crowds at his rallies to beat up protesters during the 2016 election. If you were ever wondering how long does it really take to bring one of these things to trial, we're only finding out now about the deposition. And wow. Okay. Anyway, we'll go over that later on just so that we get the exact quotes, because he's pretty sure he could have been assassinated by fruit, which is because he's a very disciplined and logical thinker, and puts together sentences in great ways. All right, well, time for us to begin the show, the Kagro in the Morning radio show being live now. Today, Kagro X, I am told by Bill in Portland, Maine, that I'm broadcasting in an exciting new crypto frequency called Kagro Hertz. Wow, terrific, I'm a billionaire. You will lose all your money as a result. That's okay with me, but the point is it's exciting and new and excitingly new as well. Please send me $1 billion. Yes, all true. You know, I saw somebody saying, I didn't check the math, I just trusted it. It sounds truthy, I'll believe it. But somebody was calculating out the amount of money that Elon Musk was spending on Twitter, although now it's looking increasingly like he won't be spending that money on Twitter after all. But to the surprise of very few, I would say. Gosh, what was it? Oh, yeah, right. So it looks like he's going to wiggle out of this thing. A couple people have noted for the record. But apparently the numbers were that I think they put it this way. It was something like if you made $200,000 a day, right? So, like, I guess that's, I don't know how much that is. Is that more than 5 times the median salary of the country? I mean, it's a good living. It's not multi-millionaire territory, but it's you're doing pretty well. $200,000 a year. $200,000 a day, though, well, gosh, that would be terrific, right? 365 times the amount made by somebody who's doing very well and making lots of money and can maybe even afford to send their kids to college and everything. But $200,000 a day, if you'd been taking that in and, say, socking it away every day since, and I think they landed on like 1492 because Columbus and all of that. I don't think it was an endorsement of the voyage or his treatment of Native Americans. I doubt it. It was just setting a date that was like a long time ago. But if you took in $200,000 a day every day since then, you still wouldn't have enough cash socked away to pay the $45 billion to buy Twitter. That's how much money we're talking about. And I think somebody else calculated. My son was telling me he and his friends tried to calculate, what if you were working a minimum wage job and earning $15 an hour? And I guess it was, if you worked 40 hours a week, every year, no vacations, how long would it take you to amass the amount of money that Elon Musk claims to have now as the richest man in the world? And I believe they placed that back. I couldn't remember which one they chose, but it was one of those like dinosaur eras. So, you'd have to start prior to the evolution of mankind by several million years. And then you might almost make it to where Elon is today. So it's an awful lot of money. The number of zeros gets a little baffling, but whenever you remember that you got to have 1,000 of these things to move up to the next step, right? So every billion is 1,000 millions. And if you're dreaming of one day making it to millionaire status, multiply that by 1,000 and you'll become a billionaire. Multiply that, of course, by now 140 and you'll get to where Elon Musk says he is. So start now, I guess, and see how you do in all of this. All right. Well, time to get to the rest of the news, and I have to sock a few things away that have come across the transom already. But Greg Dworkin is here. That's what it's all about. Now we can know what's actually in the news, and I can just gather up the drippings here from Twitter before it implodes. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine. I never really spent a lot of time worrying about Elon Musk, buying Twitter. I didn't really spend a lot of time talking about it because I was just never really sure it was going to happen. And if it does happen, it may take a couple of years. So
these things kind of go slowly.
I'm just not paying attention.
Yeah, I am enjoying the jokes that get made or the fun things that people do with the calculations. I'm not so sure how long it would take to complete things, how long it would then take to change things, and I'm not certain that he is going to be interested in or able to destroy things.
Right,
but
exactly.
If he does, then I'll go
because moderation goes way, way beyond anything Elon Musk wants. So he can tweet, "I want this" on Twitter, and it really didn't make any difference.
It takes a long time to realize your vision, even with $1 bazillion.
But, I was just interested, so I looked it up. So Alaska's operating budget is like $15 billion a year.
I'll take it.
So he could pay for Alaska 3 times.
And should.
And it's a lovely state. That's why we...
Right, see? I would if I were him. I would lease to buy, let's say. All right. Well,
so there's things in the news. We should talk about that. I noticed coming across my transom that Moderna is looking for U.S. authorization for a COVID-19 vaccine for kids under the age of 6, finally.
All right.
And they'll look at boosters, and it's all good. And if you're going to be low-key about the pandemic, which is ongoing with people still dying, then at the very least you should make vaccines as available as possible. Just as you were making Pavloxid and other treatments as available as possible for people like, the vice president.
Yes. She went and got some, or they brought it to her. I don't know how that works. Concierge service, I imagine.
What's a pill? You need a prescription. You talk to your doctor, you get a prescription. I mean, she can go to CVS.
Uber bring it to you? Who gives it? All right. Well, I guess if you're the vice president, someone brings it to you. Maybe even on like a tray or something. I don't know. Let's make it fancy.
Oh, yeah. It has to be under a little, silver cover, right? So you lift off the cover
and there's a little
tiny,
pill. Right.
bowl, and there it is.
Dining out on the
Very
Jetsons. Cute. Yeah. Maybe her husband went out and picked it up. He's that kind of guy.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And probably left a tip, too, because he's that kind of guy.
Oh. Hey,
so let's look at this piece in the New Yorker. We're going to start international today.
All right.
I thought it was interesting because it summed up a lot of our reaction, after the French election. The real meaning of Emmanuel Macron's victory.
Oh.
The fact is that in difficult circumstances, Macron has managed to win twice.
Okay.
And they talked about the fact that everybody said, the first time he won, nobody knew who he was, and everybody was voting against Le Pen, and so it didn't really mean anything. And he makes the point it actually meant a lot that he won the first time. But this time, perhaps even more. He says, this is Adam Gopnik writing in the New Yorker, he says, Le Pen did not get an enormous vote as a far-right extremist. She got an exceptionally large, though losing, share by pretending not to be a far-right extremist, which I think is an important point sometimes people forget about. Remember, she was a stealth candidate. She went out of her way
Well,
to excommunicate her father from the party, and her father was the outright fascist. And this time, Eric Zemmour, the far-right fascist, was running, whose purpose in running, I think, was to make her look moderate.
Oh, nice of him to do.
Yeah,
Nice.
J.D. Vance does
Generous.
that in Ohio. I think the primary is next week or something like that. And Seth Mandel, who's the real nut, makes Vance look moderate in comparison.
I guess, but Vance doing everything he can to insist he's...
Well, he's still moderate. He's
crazy.
a nut, too. He's just a very smooth liar. So, obviously Trump supported him and so on as such. But, Mandel and Vance running in the same primary, to me, is like Zemmour and Le Pen running in the same primary. I mean, they're both awful, but one's smoother, or at least has decided to lie, even if she's not all that smooth. So, again, back to Gopnik's analysis here. She also benefited enormously from the presence of Zemmour, who was so much further right, so unapologetically anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant that Le Pen seemed temperate by comparison. The whole force and successful burden of Macron's remarks as the campaign ended was to remind people who Le Pen really is, and what her family legacy has been.
Yes.
Though struggling to differentiate herself from her openly fascistic-minded father, she inherited her position mainly because of her family name.
Yes. It's hard to do, to disguise yourself as the Le Pen who isn't one.
Right. So he did remind people of that, and the French understood the reminder. Successful pragmatists in power will never have the glamour of unsuccessful ideologues. Important to recognize here in the United States. The British journalist Helen Lewis satirized the grudging reluctance to recognize the significance of Macron's first election in 2017, writing, "We must now confront an uncomfortable question. Why did so many French people vote for Macron? Was it a lack of economic anxiety or a lack of racism?"
Which did they lack?
Yeah, exactly. Insisting that Le Pen's predictably increased results since her last standoff 5 years ago was the real story. Insisting that that's the real story misses the point. Macron is the first sitting French president to have been reelected in 20 years. He becomes the first president of the Fifth Republic, instituted in 1958, since de Gaulle, to be returned to office by direct popular vote while still holding a parliamentary majority. Chirac was in what we call cohabitation with a left-wing government when he was reelected in 2002. Remember, the legislative elections are next month.
Okay.
As we talked about in the show yesterday.
That I do remember.
And it is possible that Mélenchon, the leftist, his party might win, and so that would be cohabitation. Macron, the centrist, has to live with a prime minister who runs the government, even though the president runs foreign policy. And so it's awkward. Chirac did it in 2002. François Mitterrand was with a right-wing assembly in 1988. Most elections in democracies are close. This one is notable for how close it wasn't. Nor did Macron tilt right. That's another important point that people forget. On the easy material, for example, of Muslim women wearing hijab, he was protective of a religious minority in a climate in which Zemmour, the fascist, proposed a law that children only be given French first names by law. He was going to pass a law telling people what to wear, what to wear, and what to name their kids.
He's probably a small government conservative.
Yeah, exactly. Small c.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds jerky.
Right. So it's going to be an ugly second term, but that's what's going on. Meanwhile, in Germany, very interesting things here. I have to do this by translation because I do not speak German. My German is awful. I don't pretend to speak German. But I have a lot of really dear German friends who explain a lot of this stuff to me. So Lorenz Hamaker writes, by a large majority today, the Bundestag approved delivery of heavy weapons to Ukraine. Now, they've been arguing about this. And Olaf Scholz, who is the current chancellor, has been dragging his feet about this. Interestingly, remember, he is a what we call a traffic light coalition leader. His party, SPD, Social Democrats, are cautious. And he was the finance minister before he was chancellor. So he's got the caution of a finance guy who doesn't want to get too far ahead of worrying about the economy and so on and so forth. The other party in the coalition, the next ranking party, are the Greens. And the Greens have been very aggressive about rearming Germany, making sure Ukraine gets weapons.
How ungreen?
Surprisingly,
yeah, right.
The foreign minister,
That's
Baerbock,
good.
has been very good about this, but also a new character we'll introduce named, Robert Habeck. Habeck is the leader of the Green Party. And in this iteration of the German government, Scholz used to be vice chancellor, and now he's chancellor. Vice chancellor isn't exactly vice president. In their system, the vice chancellor stands in for the president when the president is unavailable, but he's basically a high-ranking cabinet member.
Okay. And he doesn't automatically become chancellor if something happens to the chancellor. That has to be voted on by the German parliament. Okay. But he's still an important figure. And he had a very extraordinary discussion about why he, as a Green and as vice chancellor, supports supplying Ukraine with heavy weapons. Okay. And he's one of the better German politicians about simply appearing before the camera and explaining to the German people what's going on here. And he says this was a tough decision, but I remember being in Mariupol last year. I stayed in the hotel. That hotel is now destroyed. This is something we have to do. And then he went on to say, and this is a quote, "The decisions we make will also kill people. And with the weapons we send, people will be killed. In this case, Russian soldiers. But we have to do it anyway," he went on to say. That's pretty green.
Very straightforward.
I mean, in the way, in the way of being honest about that. If you're trying to get your head around Greens saying send weapons, they're not. This is not your father or uncles or aunts or non-gender specific relatives' Green Party necessarily.
This is the story in the Frankfurter Allgemein newspaper. Bundestag votes for delivery of heavy weapons. They've adopted a joint resolution in support of Ukraine with the votes of the Traffic Light Coalition. The third group, I guess, is FDP, which is a liberal but business-friendly group. And they don't have nearly as much say in the government as the other two parties. So they're the yellow along with the green and the red.
Right. Okay.
And the parliamentary group of the CDU and CSU, which is the opposition. And basically everybody agreed to do this. The opposition claimed that Scholz was dragging his feet and too slow. Nonetheless, it's something that they have to do. It's just very, very interesting that the criticism about doing this is mostly from the AfD, which is the rightist party, and from the very left. Okay. So basically the middle of the country sort of agrees that this is something they have to do. And it's important that they move on that. And it's important that they support everything else that's going on. And everybody's been frustrated with Germany, but it seems like Germany is finally coming around.
All right. Great.
Meanwhile, in Bulgaria, I think I mentioned this yesterday, major shakeup in Bulgaria as the leading coalition partner, previously seen as dependent on the pacifist president, took a clear pro-Ukraine stance and attacked the president in presuming that Russia will win this war while we think Ukraine will win.
Okay.
So Bulgaria, who had their gas cut off, and Poland, who had the gas cut off, don't seem to be backing off. So there's a lot of moves today that happened in Ukraine yesterday and today that are making people nervous. Yes, there's the eye on Moldova and seeing what's going on there. Russians are making incremental advances along all their fronts. Furious attacks and counterattacks and defense by the Ukrainians, but everybody understands this is going to be a rough period here. Ukraine is being armed. You can't say rearmed, but they're being armed. It takes a while to get all the logistical heavy equipment there, and Russia has a lot of troops. So in the end, Ukraine may in fact prevail, but it's going to take a while. Everybody understands that, and now we're in the slow grinded out phase where you're not going to get a tremendous amount of news every day. but it's going to be rough on the ground. And so you're not going to read about Ukrainian advances either. And so one has to be prepared for all of that and sort of look at it, in the long view. Meanwhile, the Russians are sounding more and more belligerent. This was a piece yesterday, Mark Galeotti's writing. Nikolai Patrushev, Hawk's hawk and man I described as the most dangerous man in Russia for an article I wrote, has given an interview to government newspaper, Russkaya Gazeta, the Russian Gazette, maybe?
Sounds like
a lengthy thread. On one level, it's the kind of talking points we've heard before, but vitriol and hyperbole added. Why is this a war not with Ukraine but the West, he says? Because of U.S. ambitions of global hegemony, which means it seeks to force Russia to give up its sovereignty, self-consciousness, culture, independent foreign and domestic policy. So this is a proxy war because the Americans are using their proteges in Kiev, Kiev, the way they say it, to create an antipode for our country, trying to divide an essentially single people.
Right.
And if Kremlin decides it needs to escalate a special military operation into a war, unlocking mobilization, then it needs to present the conflict as an already having been escalated by the West to avoid admitting that this is a response to failure. So that's what they're doing.
Huh. Well,
so it's interesting because, I'm expecting that what's going to happen is that Russia will realize that they can't achieve their ambitions. And I expect them to mobilize, and I expect it to get worse before it gets better. But still, there's rising pressure, a lot of tension seen on Russian TV, people screaming at each other. Why don't you have a minute of silence for the dead? How dare you speak of the dead? We're in the process of having this special operations, and it's unpatriotic to talk about that stuff. And so both are supportive on Russian TV, but yelling at each other. It's point counterpoint, it's just not something you expect. You expect everybody to be laughing about how easy this is because that's what they've been doing up till now, and how we're winning and how Ukraine is terrible and doesn't really exist. Not yelling at each other about how Mother Russia is handling the situation. So again, that's just an example of some of the tension that's going on in Russia, and it will build because there's a lot of casualties, and people understand that their families understand the casualties, even if they're just listed as missing, rather than acknowledging that they died. Yes. And they'll be upset, and there'll be lots of pressure. So, we'll see how that develops. This is a different angle. This is Maria Pevchik writing on Twitter. And again, one of the reasons I don't abandon Twitter just because Elon Musk is a jerk is because you find out a whole lot of stuff on Twitter that you don't find out anywhere else. So she's writing about a relatively famous Russian musician, maestro. Valery Gergiev, you may have heard of him, celebrity conductor who headed the London Symphony Orchestra, Munich Philharmonic, Philharmonic, and once the most wanted guest at La Scala, the Met Opera, Grand Opera, everywhere.
He was on everybody's list.
Many years ago.
Yes, okay.
He, who's also the director of the Mariinsky Theater, made a deal with Putin. He, the maestro, whitewashes Putin abroad. In exchange, he gets to steal as much money as he can grab.
Oh, well, I mean, when I say have to, it sounds like a good idea.
Public support for Putin, heartfelt love speeches in exchange for cash. Yeah. He writes things like, in my opinion, all these collective letters are completely useless. A burp of the Soviet past, this guy writes, Vladimir Putin has a clear and deeply penetrating logic when he talks about Crimea, the situation in Ukraine, and more. The president can explain everything, convince everyone of everything. Russia's lucky it has such a strong leader, he writes, and he definitely doesn't need protection from the cultural community. Moreover, this one dressed in the form of public appeal. She goes on to say what he does is he's obviously a terrific conductor. And he goes around the world, and people love his stuff. And he's basically saying, if you love me, you should love my country. And if you love my country, you should love my leader.
Well, no. But all right. Thank you for saying so.
It's a trick. It's a deception, she writes.
Yeah,
he's assigned the role of an unofficial minister of foreign affairs, informal ambassador of Putin abroad, the alternative face of Russia, a less ugly one than the ones we're used to. Mm. And then she talks about how much money he makes and how much money he takes and all the incredibly expensive property he owns.
All right.
And some of the examples in the past of what he's doing. Consider this, for example. In 2014, the Russian troops secretly posted to Ukraine, shot down a passenger plane, MH17, killing 300 innocent people. You may remember that incident or may not.
I do.
We know who, when, how the missile was launched. These are the Russian soldiers sent by Putin.
Right.
The plane was going from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, so naturally there were a lot of Dutch on board, 193 to be precise. And then a few weeks later, this maestro here hosts a memorial concert in Rotterdam dedicated to those Dutchmen who died in the plane crash, even though the guy who he's supporting is the one who shot everything down. That's really the gist of her piece here and how this guy operates.
Well, yeah, probably people did not make that connection, and the Russians weren't owning up to the shoot down at that point anyway, but even if they had, I mean, who would think, oh, well, this conductor, he's from the same country, so he probably knows him. Like, you know, you're not supposed to think that way.
His literal boss, Vladimir Putin, is the one who killed these people. And Gurdjieff stands in the heart of the country that lost 193 people and mourns as if the plane exploded on its own.
Did he?
Right. Oh, and by the way, it turns out he's also a Dutch citizen.
Oh. Well, then do something about it. I guess that's on you guys.
We discovered in our recent investigation he used his Dutch passport to register an Italian firm, and nobody in Russia knew this.
Oh. Well.
So it's probably an honorary citizenship granted to him, you know, for his musical work, but he used that to leverage loans and money and, you know, more money, and there's a whole bunch of tweets about more money and all the property he owns and so on and so forth. And, you know, it's an oligarch by a different name.
Yeah.
He just happens to be a talented one who really can conduct.
He can do that. That's a talent he happens to have. The other ones have a talent for murder, and everybody does what they can do. All right, take his wooden shoes away and kick him out of the country, as far as I can tell. Interesting. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue with, I don't know what exactly, but whatever it is, it was going to have more to do with the opera. I'm excited about that story.
Yeah, well, the Metropolitan Opera is at Lincoln Center in New York City,
yes,
which is approximately Broadway 67th, Lincoln Square, more or less. So it's the Upper West Side. And in her long tweet thread about the different assets this fellow owns, she has a little video, and she's getting his autograph. She smiles, he smiles, she gets the autograph, and as she walks away, she does one of those Spock eyebrow things.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And then she says, here's me taking his autograph. This is not a sign of admiration. I needed a signature to be able to verify that it matches the one on the title deed for a New York penthouse worth $5 million. And it does.
Well, got him.
He's been hiding his New York City flat from the Russian authorities for over 15 years. As a government official, he must declare all foreign assets. Apart from that lovely penthouse next to the Metropolitan Opera, which is, again, at Lincoln Center,
yes,
we have also found out that he has over $100 million worth of buildings and land in 8 Italian cities. They're mainly some agricultural plots of land, but there are also some gems in his portfolio, like this wonderful cape. Like he owns the whole cape. I don't mean a cape like house. I mean a land cape.
Oh, the whole spit
that,
of land.
Be the size of a village. Close to Naples, the whole thing belongs to him. He also has numerous properties in Milan, which he's recently sold for 47 million euros. But the crown jewel is his Palazzo Barbarigo in Venice an iconic 16th century building on the Grand Canal.
Wow.
In order for me to film it, I had to take a gondola. Now, tell me that my job isn't the coolest in the world.
That's a pretty good one, I guess.
And then here's me stopping for coffee. The coffee's on Piazza San Marco. The cafe is called Cafe Quadri, and it occupies the premises that also belong to the Russian maestro and Putin's buddy.
Okay. Well, he's got some nice properties. It's interesting. I noticed the second time you mentioned it that he's hiding the penthouse from the Russian government, his ownership.
Oh, apparently. That's what she
interesting.
says. So I'm not really clear who knows what about which.
Well, now we know which window he'll fall out
but
of.
probably the official, I have to fill out this form rather than Putin doesn't know about it. Putin, of course, knows about it.
You would think, right?
He knows about what all the oligarchs are doing.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe it's more along the lines of he has Putin's permission to hide it from the Russian taxing authorities, so he doesn't have to pay whatever tax there might be on it, but they know he owns it. I mean, if we know, I guess Putin knows. All right, interesting. So lots of property and I don't know what. So I always thought those conductors lived a little high on the hog. So
well, not all of them, but this particular one, I suppose. This is a piece from Lawfare taking yet another different look at what's going on inside Russia.
All right, Lawfare.
And it talks about the legacy of the Soviet-Afghan War and its role in the Ukrainian invasion.
And Lawfare knows about this?
Yeah.
All right, let's see.
And basically what is described here, Emily Hogue is talking about this, is talking about some of the veterans groups and how they evolved from after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which are basically disaffected veterans who felt like their country, Russia, abandoned them.
Okay.
And so they formed these support groups. And over time, they've been replaced by more right-leaning people calling themselves veterans, not all of whom are veterans, who are like super into pushing this Ukrainian annexation.
Okay. Is that making them feel better about having lost Afghanistan? Is that part of it?
Sort of this.
All right.
So she talks about a particular video, a particular character here. Most of the video is given over to a pro-war rant by a muscular bald man with an intense gaze describing the invasion of Ukraine as a noble mission of denazification, completing the work of World War II. And some people in Russia have been interfering with that noble mission by protesting. Now, the central figure of the video says he supports a mission to cleanse Europe of fascism. The whole video looks astonishingly fascistic itself.
Yeah.
And the bald man speaking in the video, who originally organized demonstrations, is named Anton Demidov, a nationalist activist and frequent organizer of AstroTurf pro-Kremlin protest movements, and the head of a volunteer brigade of an organization called Combat Brotherhood, a group for veterans of the Soviet-Afghan War of the 80s.
Yeah, he's not.
Right.
Is he old enough?
No. Parts of the video from Combat Brotherhood's volunteer brigade align with characteristics of the movement for veterans of the Afghan War, known as the Afghan Movement, when it started in the 80s, referring to other soldiers as brothers, regarding anti-war activists at home as betrayers. Overall, the new stance of the group is little continuity with its origins, however, and in some ways it betrays its history entirely. The Afghan movement was originally partially an anti-war movement, and most fundamentally, its members thought of and organized themselves as victims of the state, not supporters of it.
Yeah.
Then they've been replaced by these guys. And he himself, of course, is not a veteran.
They will not be replaced. Okay. Yeah, and although he looks, the look is, I would say, without having to describe it over the radio, the guy from Full Metal Jacket who shoots himself.
Yeah, pretty much. So how did the veterans movement go from protesting resentment of the war to recreating it now? The shift happened in the 2000s as the goals and the historical politics of the Afghan movement began to align with those of the Russian state. In the 80s and 90s, the Afghan movement was defined through its mix of trauma and resentment. But in the 2000s, the economy improved, the state became relatively functional again, and Vladimir Putin began to define and legitimize the Russian state through a nationalism based on the same trauma and betrayal the Afghan veterans group was talking about. Its main legitimizing story was that it ended the deep poverty and trauma of the 90s. you got to get past Vietnam. You got to move on. Forget about all that stuff.
Yeah, similar. Okay.
Right? Get over your post-Vietnam trauma. You know, be happy about going to war again. Whatever it is, you know, whatever the analogy is here.
All right.
This story resonated with Russians who had struggled to survive the chaotic and violent 90s, so it was particularly effective at earning support for the Russian state and new kinds of repressions and militaristic nationalism. And as the Afghan movement and state began to align that way, the memory and memorializations of the Afghan war began to align as well. By about 2009, the memory of the Afghan war was also changed in the veterans movement in a fashion that tended to align with the state. And having thus reassessed the Afghan war, the Russian government started to provide the kind of financial assistance to veterans that had been lacking, so they basically bought the group. Demidov, who heads the volunteer branch for one of the largest veterans organizations, isn't a veteran, nor does being the head of Combat Brotherhood's volunteer brigade means he engages in volunteer work on behalf of the brigade.
Okay. None of this is...
What he does is he takes money from the state for Afghan veterans, to make it short, and he organizes rallies.
Yeah, in favor of invading
That's who it is, and that's what he... But the origins of the group and how it strayed from their original roots to this is part and parcel of, you know, evolution of a Russians' view of themselves, despondency after the Soviet Union broke up, and how Putin is pushing all sorts of buttons domestically to try to get back to support a Soviet Union-style approach to the rest of the world, which is, again, why is this an important story? Because it helps to understand how come Putin just say, okay, we lost, I guess we should cut our losses and leave. He can't. He set up this whole alternative world, alternative universe, alternative dimension narrative that the Russian government, the state, the people want to get back to what was once there. And in rewriting history about Afghanistan, for example, he rewrites history about, you know, Ukraine, including Ukrainian not really people not really being a people, Ukraine not being a state, Ukrainian not being a language. You know, it's all part of Russia, and the fact that they don't acknowledge being part of Russia and don't want to, well, it's just something that we'll have to fix. And it's really hard to back off from that. And so, you know, when you look at that perspective, you understand why, you know, he is certainly committed to the long term. I'm not going to leave until I succeed, or unless you make me leave. And, you know, it perhaps sounds like saber rattling and war mongering on the part of the United States to say, okay, well, then we're committed too.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, to put that in perspective even more, this is Walter Shapiro writing in The New Republic.
Oh, moving on. Okay.
Well, you know, there's a theme to all of this I'm trying to get to.
No, I just want to read along.
They're committed, and I'm trying to explain why they're committed. We need to be committed too. The U.S. needs an end game in the Russia-Ukraine war. So far, Biden and the public are fully behind sending arms to fight Russia, but will the time come for a Putin-appeasing peace treaty? When do you get to the point, like the German vice chancellor, where you say, we have to do this, but we totally understand what we're doing is killing people. People are dying because of this.
Yes. All right.
And it's important never to lose sight of that, never to lose the perspective that you're doing this because you have to, not because you want to, not because it's good. It might be right and correct, but, you know, that kind of level of death and destruction is not good. So you can be happy when Ukraine makes advances against Russians and still understand that in the process of doing that, people die. Yes,
that's how you would do it.
Unfortunately. So
in a war,
Walter Shapiro, who's been around for a long time writing about American politics, a very good analyst and reporter, writes, the quest for total victory in Ukraine is premised on the belief that defeat is the best deterrent. Having forged NATO unity and a surprising degree of economic sacrifice by the Europeans, and again, look at Poland and Bulgaria getting cut off from Russian energy sources, Putin should be under no illusions that next time will be easier. The Ukraine war is one of those rare times when the morally right course, forcing Russia to retreat from all of Ukraine, is also the approach that appears to make the most strategic sense. There are no certainties in an irrational war seemingly brought on by Putin's passion to restore the Soviet Union. And the previous story that we were talking about in the evolution of veterans groups is just meant to illustrate just how deep, seated Putin has succeeded in putting those Russian goals into the psyche of the Russian people. Mm-hmm. There are no certainties in an irrational war seemingly brought on by Putin's passion to restore the Soviet Union, but America should do everything in its power, short of sending troops, to bring victory parades to Kyiv. So he's not a big fan of war, but you know what? You got to do what you got to do, and that's basically the bottom line.
Parades, anyway. Yeah, okay. Understood. So, but I guess no timeline on coming up with that end game. We need one, but you've got some time? I don't know how much.
Well, we don't know how much.
Yeah. Well, we may never know. But yeah, I guess the point being that the day may come when it makes sense for both Ukraine and the rest of the world to say, even short of victory in their war, or I guess once it's achieved, at some point they say, all right, this is the end of the war, and is the rest of the world okay with it?
Right.
All right. Well.
Anyway, that's the overseas report. Nothing to report really that I know of going on in Great Britain. Boris Johnson's still Boris Johnson. Things are still simmering there, but it's going to take a little while for it to come to a head. By the way, I haven't read anything recently about the Israeli government falling, even though the Israeli government is,
we've been
sort of going along on momentum.
Oh, well, I guess that's a good sign for your country, I suppose, is to be able to limp along without an actual government.
So let's, in the few minutes remaining, talk a little bit about domestic stuff.
All right. Are we sending?
For example, we have this one from Politico. Multiple RNC staffers have spoken to the January 6th panel, sources say.
Okay.
And they're talking about communications and finance.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the officials who've spoken with investigators are former employees who worked during the 2020 election cycle, including the front period between Election Day and January 6th. That means the committee has more insight than previously known. Every time you hear a report about this, they know more than was previously known. Well, they do know a lot more.
Better, I mean, geez.
That means the committee has more insight than previously known into the Republican Party's activity in the lead up to January 6th, and underscores the Select Committee's interest in how political messaging by the national GOP, which partnered with Trump on digital fundraising efforts, may have stoked falsehoods about the 2020 election. They want to know just how successful one particular email campaign was at getting users to click through to donation websites. These emails prompted people to give money based on false claims the election was stolen. And committee investigators have said they're interested in who authorized the specific message about the election outcome.
Okay.
So they really seem to be going into a whole lot of, I want details, names, places, examples of who knew they were lying when they did this.
And how much money did they take in exchange for making these lies? That's a good question.
Ronna McDaniel.
What they do with it? And
Ronna McDaniel, the RNC chair, has met with panel investigators, but on the day she did, the RNC sued to block Salesforce, which I guess was their specific company or group, from complying with the January 6th committee subpoena.
It's an outside vendor.
Which also sought information on fundraising pitches questioning the integrity of the 2020 election and on metrics related to the campaign. So that's one of the things they wanted. Oh, look, we're raising a lot of money saying that it was stolen. I guess we should still keep saying it's stolen. So why is that important? Well, it shows that you knew you were lying.
Yeah.
And that you did it for money. Now, what you did with that is a different issue altogether, which hopefully they'll relate back to what happened.
All right.
But there's no way Trump could have known. He was really sincere when he said that the election was stolen. So you can't call him a liar. You don't know what was in his head. Well, if you have evidence here that they knew they were lying, they were using it for fundraising, then it's very hard to make the case that, we didn't know. We didn't know.
Yeah.
We thought it might have been legitimate. And that's Scott Perry's excuse, the fellow who was caught, representative from Pennsylvania, who was extremely involved with Mark Meadows' back and forth stuff. And in a parallel story here, and this is from the Bulwark, the most damning part of the Meadows text, Mark Meadows' text to various and sundry people, including Rick Perry, who said he didn't do it, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said she can't remember. The most damning part of the Meadows text, Rick Perry signed his, so he can't even claim it was like Somebody took my phone and did it for
Somebody
me.
took my phone and signed it. I don't see it. It's not so hard. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, the most damning part of the Meadows text, he knew the president was lying, and he kept helping to spread the lies anyway. And
Yes.
I was laughing because you know who wrote this story in The Bulwark, which is a center-right anti-Trump bastion?
No.
Bulwark? William Salatin
Okay.
of
What?
Atrios fame.
Yeah, why? Huh?
Well, I don't know, but there it is.
Because they would print it, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
Reaching that audience.
We've known for a long time, based on audits, investigations, and court reviews, that Donald Trump's allegations about massive fraud in the 2020 presidential election are false. We also know, based on firsthand accounts from Trump's former aides, attorneys, and political allies, that Trump's advisors repeatedly told him the allegations were false. That leaves two possibilities. Either Trump is lying or he's trying to overthrow the government.
Okay.
Take your pick.
Overthrow
And
the
now
government.
we're compiling similar evidence against Mark Meadows, who was Trump's chief of staff during the election. He, too, knew Trump accusations were false, and instead of telling the truth, Meadows helped spread the lies. And the latest evidence comes from a batch of more than 2,000 text messages revealed by CNN that were sent to or from Meadows between November 3rd, 2020, and January 20th, 2021. So those 3 months. 3 of the exchanges are particularly instructive, one in early November, another in late November, and a third in early December. And this is with Jason Miller. And Jason Miller explains to the team why the Trump's team accusation of ballot box stuffing in Philadelphia were wildly implausible based on trend data and statewide data. Basically, the votes that Biden got were fully consistent with what Democrats generally get, in other words.
Yes.
What did Meadows and others in the Trump campaign do with this information? Apparently nothing.
Right. Ignore
The
it.
day after Miller sent the text, Trump announced a press conference saying it took a couple of days after the election to produce enough ballots to put Joe Biden ahead. And could some of these ballots have been manufactured in advance by the Democrat machine in Philadelphia, when Jason Miller the day before said, nah, that's not what happened.
They were looking for cheesesteak fibers in the ballots.
Right. On November 20th, 2 weeks after Miller sent that text, Meadows got another message, this time from a contact in Florida. The message asked about allegations that Dominion voting systems had committed fraud against Trump in computing the results. In response, Meadows said he's not that confident in the allegations.
Okay. Well.
And Ginny Thomas was asking Meadows why Trump's legal team was distancing himself from Sidney Powell. Meadows wrote back, she doesn't have anything, or at least she wouldn't share it if she does. So Trump's advisors knew the allegations were unsubstantiated, and that Powell, when asked for substantiation, refused to supply it. But Trump continued to smear Dominion on Twitter in a contemporaneous manner.
Right. As did,
So Meadows knew the smears were baseless. He said nothing. And last example, December 2020, Meadows got another text message. This one came from Kushner. It alerted Meadows to an article that fact-checked the false story Trump was telling about Georgia. Trump's story was that election workers in Atlanta had been caught on video using a suitcase full of ballots to inflate Biden's vote tally. The fact check explained the video had been misrepresented and that the story was false. So Trump went to Georgia and accused Democrats of rigging the state's vote count via suitcase. And Meadows wasn't a bystander in all of this. He knew about it. The texts show he knew about it. He didn't do anything about it anyway. And that's 3 episodes in which Meadows, knowing Trump was spreading falsehoods about the election, either kept silent or collaborated in the deception. So again, I'm citing these stories because I expect when the January 6th committee does its job, we're going to hear a whole lot about it isn't a question of trying to get in their head. We knew they were lying, and here are specific examples showing they knew they were lying, and they did it anyway. So in terms of what was the motivation, what was the thinking at the time, whatever the legal term is for, assumption of guilt, evidence of guilt, whatever it is you're thinking that made you look like you were acting. It's there. They have it documented.
Yeah. Now all they have to do is get the courts to decide that, like Fox News, they have a right to lie in this context, and it's
Something
okay.
like that. Yeah, they're politicians. They're supposed to
Of course
lie.
they lie. Right.
Well, that's a different standard, and you can tell that. You can tell the difference between Marjorie Taylor Greene in Court Under Oath and Marjorie Taylor Greene on the stump.
Yeah. It's only a slight difference sometimes, but you can definitely see the discomfort on her face. It was nice to have her in a position where a judge could tell her, you need to just answer that question. You can't make a speech. But she did her best to defy the judge, too.
Well, her defense was, I don't remember any of this.
Right. When push comes to shove, and you have
that could have been a text
answer,
I wrote, but I don't remember writing it. I don't know.
Yeah, and even if
I don't remember reading that.
And if you can prove that I did, how do I know you didn't fake the proof?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember being on a call with other members of Congress when I wasn't even sworn in yet, talking about how we were going to organize an insurrection. I don't remember that. I mean, these things happen like all the time, right? Yeah. So how would I remember that specific episode of a newly elected person being on a conference call with actual real congressmen when I wasn't one yet? Why would I remember that? It's not significant. It's not. It wouldn't stand out in your life.
No. Well, a large part of her life is invented.
Do you remember the time that you met Obama and you were like part of a discussion group?
No.
See, that's my point.
Right. I don't recall anything. Believe me.
I mean, that stuff happens all the time. Why would you recall such a thing?
I can't even tell you how many times that happened to me.
Right. I don't recall the time I went to the White House and I was part of a discussion about pandemic preparedness. I mean, it happens so often. How could I possibly remember that?
Yeah, which time?
Happened?
Right. It was
why would it stand out in your mind?
Well, all right. She's a. What can you do? She's a liar.
She's a liar.
It's great that they're doing this thing to establish
again, the whole
that
point
she's
here
an idiot.
Is trying to document the lying to make it so crystal clear that everybody understands that they are lying about all of this. And bringing it back to Trump, there's no possible way he didn't know.
Right. But let's just say that was the case anyway.
Well, we knew, but the American public is one that needs to know. Mm-hmm. Last piece, which hopefully will take us to 10 o'clock. So hopefully whatever it is you were doing, you were able to do it there in the background.
I have no idea. Maybe.
Including having breakfast. We hope.
Oh.
Did you forget?
Yeah. So let's get through the show so I can eat. Jeez.
Just call Trump a loser. His record is clear. Some nervy Republican challenger should say so by Mark Leibovich in The Atlantic. And goes on to, point out, look, he lost the House, he lost the Senate, he lost the White House.
True, right.
He's a loser. Why aren't his Republican opponents, pointing that out to people? And the answer, of course, we all know. They know he's a loser. They can't stand him, but they're totally terrified of his base, probably for two reasons. One, physically, and the other is you won't vote for me, and I need your votes because without the votes of the nutcases, I can't possibly win.
Yes. And I guess that's you can be a general election loser, but a primary election force. So, I got to get through the primary first in order to make it to the general. I can't fight you and then make it to the point where I get to contest for this office. So I guess I just have to suck up to you.
You remember Barbara Comstock. She was a Republican congresswoman from Virginia, of all places.
From my district, yes.
So I knew you'd remember her, and here's her quote. Why on earth would we hitch our wagons again to a crybaby sore loser who lost the popular vote twice, lost the House, lost the Senate, and lost the White House, and so on? Yes. For Republicans, whether they embrace the big lie or not, Trump's vulnerable to having the stench of disaster on him.
True. Unfortunately, the counter to that is if you're a Republican thinking of running for office, you might ask yourself, what's Barbara Comstock doing now? Oh, she's busy losing, as she did lose her seat in Congress. Maybe I shouldn't take her advice, but you should because it makes all right, whatever. But that's one of the problems is the field is strewn with Republican losers calling each other losers, but they're all correct.
Anyway,
amazingly,
that's my wrap up for the week.
Okay. That's a pretty good summation of everything that's happened. That's a tough one to get your head around, right? That all of these Republicans are losers, and they know the other ones are losers. But they're actually right once in their life, and this is it. Are you going to take the risk and believe them? Well, all right. I'll take your word for it on the summary of this thing, so I don't have to click on the Atlantic, even though it is it's according to the end of the month. Maybe I can click on it. And if I still have clicks left, it'll refresh themselves by next Monday. So, okay. It's a good deal. Good time to bring up an Atlantic article, Greg. Well done. Okay. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, today is being Thursday. We won't see you again until Monday.
Oh, you're back on Mondays,
yeah.
like normal and everything?
Monday will be normal. Tuesday, which is not your day, will be, I guess, abnormal by comparison. I think we'll have to do a non-live thing there, but I've already worked that out with Joan, so you're in the clear. Very good.
All right, so we'll see you Monday, Wednesday.
Excellent. Thank you. Continue to collect those stories, and I'll continue to rifle through them. There's plenty to catch up on today. Of course, we didn't even get to the fact that Donald Trump says under oath, I guess, in a deposition that he was afraid of being assassinated by fruit.
Yeah, it's not just killer tomatoes; it's also pineapples.
The attackable. Although I got to say, yeah, I mean, if points to anybody who was thinking of throwing heaving pineapples at a Trump rally. I don't know how you get the pineapples in the first place, but
yeah, you ever see what Gallagher does to a watermelon? Come on.
Right. I don't know. Yeah. So, I mean, there are certainly among the more dangerous fruit. And there's extra points for Trump realizing that during the deposition, that, as well as the opposing counsel, that tomatoes are fruit. And they discussed that and the fact that they have seeds and everything. But, yeah, afraid of being pelted with tomatoes. And he's pretty sure, Trump was, that there had been an alert that day, that security forces all over the world were on alert for fruit attacks, so it was perfectly justifiable for him to tell people to beat people up in the crowd.
So how did that transcript rate on Rotten Tomatoes?
The tomatoes, yeah, I don't know whether they didn't mention that they were rotten. They just said that they were fruit, and that was that. But pineapples, I've never heard of anybody being, I mean, even everyone knows that there are certain things you do with fruit. Tomatoes are for pelting people. Bananas are for peeling and dropping on the sidewalk to get people to slip on them and fall. Pineapples have just never been a part of this, and so it's an exciting new development.
Well, you can't talk about what you do with kumquats in polite company. Everybody knows that. Anyway, take care. See you next week.
All right, we'll continue on after this 1 minute break. Thanks again to Greg, and thanks to Donald Trump for coming up with the killer fruit theory. I think we're done with that and can move on.
Good, quick, have some breakfast.
Good idea. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I guess the fruit thing having been done now, I guess I don't have to read that story, but I imagine you've all heard it by now. It was pretty funny the way he put things in his very eloquent statement of things, that he was afraid of being pelted with very dangerous fruit. And the line I like, the way he put it, saying, "You can be killed if that happens." That sounds like, well, it's wishful thinking if I actually am expressing it. But for him, I don't know. And, I don't know how it evolved from tomatoes to pineapples, but I guess he was trying to think of fruit that would be dangerous if you got hit by it. And there aren't that many. I mean, and I guess pineapples, yeah. Watermelon, sure. I think a sizable papaya probably would do it. Some of the guava family, before it's entirely ripened, maybe would be the unripened fruit, or fruit that hasn't fully ripened, of course, would be more dangerous. But generally speaking, the fruit category, not that much. You could do some serious damage, though, I guess, with apples and peaches, or relatively hard. Peaches if they're not ripe. But I don't know what the season was. But now, of course, you can get produce from all around. And, of course, if you have the arm for it, there are some sizable things. Some of the more exotics, let's say. Like I said, the papayas. Is coconut a fruit? I mean, that would be fairly dangerous, I think. I don't know whether that counts as fruit. Jackfruit, pretty big, hefty kind of thing. Again, difficult to get in under your coat into the rally, et cetera, et cetera. But at any rate, it's out there, and Felicia Sonmez has some fun with it over at the Washington Post. But I think we can move past that one. There's not that much to it, except that, dangerous fruit. Seems like a dumb thing. Let's see. Let's head over to Reuters here. Reuters identifying more data points in a growing trend. They offer us this special report. Trump allies breach U.S. voting systems in search of 2020 fraud, quote, evidence. compiling the various incidents in which Trump allies have attempted illegally to access voting machines to do just that. They believe that there's some sort of forensic evidence to be recovered from the hard drives of these computer-driven voting systems, and in order to get it, they are willing to try to break in and steal it, which of course destroys the chain of custody such that, I mean, eventually it'll come to this, right? Like, if you come to learn that there is no such coding in any of these machines, the stuff that you think is there isn't there, but you need it to be there in order to, quote unquote, prove your point, to win the claim that the election was stolen, and then do something with that, convince everybody to believe that the election should be overturned or whatever. Whether you're focused on 2020 or looking ahead to 2024, eventually what happens is when you are able to destroy the chain of custody by stealing these things, you can just plant the evidence you want and then say, look at what was here. And the true custodians of the machines will say, well, the problem is that the chain of custody has been broken on that thing. You stole it and tampered with it. You say you were just copying what was there, but I say you were in fact planting the evidence you wanted to have that would supposedly prove your theory. And then the perpetrators of the theft and the planting say, that's just what a deep state operative would say when he's been caught red-handed. And then the side that was believing these nuts will continue to believe them, and the side that knows that that's crazy will continue to believe that's crazy and will get nowhere. But in the meantime, they'll say, we found the proof. We manufactured the proof, but we found the proof. So here's what's going on. The setup for this, I guess this would be count as the subheader for this article. Chasing proof of vote rigging conspiracy theories, Republican officials and activists in 8 U.S. locales have plotted, anyway, to gain illegal access to balloting systems, undermining the security of elections they claim to protect. That is, of course, the big irony here. Just like people who bring guns into the home for protecting themselves and their families, but who end up accidentally shooting themselves or shooting other family members who come in late and they think they're a burglar or whatever the situation is. Or then, of course, the parents who bring guns with them to pick up their kids at school in case somebody brings a gun to school and becomes a school shooter, who then accidentally, poof, become school shooters themselves when something goes horribly wrong with the handheld instant death machine that they brought to their child's school. Anyway, similar in that respect. Alexandra Ulmer and Nathan Lane, not the actor Nathan Lane, but the same, I guess, Nathan Lane that we read the other day in Reuters, teaming up on this piece, datelined, curiously enough, Kiowa, is that right? Kiowa, Colorado, or I don't know, Kiowa, or I mean, it's Iowa with a K in front of it. Kiowa? Do they say Kiowa? They should, but I gather it might be Kiowa. All right, well, somebody from Colorado can tell us. There are plenty of you out there. Let's do your duty and let us know how it's pronounced. 18 months. It begins after Donald Trump lost the White House. Loyal supporters continue to falsely assert that compromised balloting machines across America robbed him of the 2020 election. And then, ironically, of course, to prove it, they went and robbed the depots and storage houses where these machines are being stored. And there you go. Now the true theft has been proven through my theft of these machines, which I say were thieving the election all along. The only way to prove the crime is to become criminal. That's not in the article. That's what I'm taking away from it. Continuing what's actually in the article. To stand up that bogus claim, not to that, but to stand that bogus claim itself up, some Trump diehards are taking the law into their own hands. That is, by breaking it. By attempting, some with success, or with some success, but that's the same thing, to compromise the voting systems themselves. Previously unreported surveillance video captured one such effort in August in the rural Colorado town of, we think maybe, Kiowa. Is that in the district where, well, we'll find out. We'll read on where the clerk was breaking in with her assistants into the storage place, or is this another thing in Colorado? Footage obtained by Reuters through a public records request shows Elbert County Clerk Dallas Schroeder, unless he says Schrader, but anyway, Dallas Schroeder, different person, the county's top election official, not the one I was thinking of, fiddling with cables and typing on his phone as he copied computer drives containing sensitive voting information, stealing the voting information to prove that somebody else had stolen voter information. Schroeder, a Republican, later testified that he was receiving instructions on how to copy the system's data from a retired Air Force colonel and political activist bent on proving Trump lost because of fraud. This is what made me think of, well, what if you were actually receiving instructions on how to upload data to the system that would look like it had been there all along, or maybe not even look like it. It would do a bad job at faking it, but you'd point to it and say, look what I found on the hard drive here. And the hard drive log would say, you added this yesterday. Oh, I didn't realize that it kept logs like that. Shoot. Well, we'll see whether that comes to pass. That day, August 26th, Schroeder made a forensic image of everything on the election server, according to his testimony, and later gave the cloned hard drives to 2 lawyers. Schroeder is now under investigation for possible violation of election laws by the Colorado Secretary of State, which has also sued him, seeking the return of the data. Schroeder is defying that state demand and has refused to identify the lawyers, or at least one of the lawyers, who took possession of the hard drives. The other is a private attorney who works with an activist backed by Mike Lindell, the pillow mogul and election conspiracy theorist. So again, just totally destroying the chain of custody here. How do we know that he is copying what's on the drive as opposed to uploading things to the drive and then maybe copying it? Maybe he doesn't even know what he's doing. He's just following the instructions. And of course, I claim that I copied the hard drive and gave it to an undisclosed person. And then another undisclosed person gave me the hard drive back along with notes telling me what was on it. Is it the drive? Is it a clone? Is it accurate? Is it not? Does this person know what they're doing? We don't know any of that, and I won't tell you. Schroeder said in a legal filing that he believed he had a, quote, statutory duty to preserve voting records. He declined to comment for this report. Of course, if there was such a duty, it was being fulfilled by storing the information on that hard drive. And stealing that information off of the hard drive and cloning it is not preserving voting records. It's stealing voting records. That's a problem. The episode is among 8 known attempts to gain unauthorized access to voting systems in 5 U.S. states since the 2020 election. All involved local Republican office holders or party activists who have advanced Trump's stolen election falsehoods or conspiracy theories about rigged voting machines, according to a Reuters examination of the incidents. Some of the breaches, including the one in Elbert County, were inspired in part by the false belief that state-ordered voting system upgrades or maintenance would erase evidence of alleged fraud in the 2020 election. In fact, state election officials say those processes have no impact on the voting system's ability to save data from past elections. So they claim. I mean, they might be right, but they do claim that, and I'm correct to say so, with all the insinuations that come along with it. The incidents also include a North Carolina case, first reported last week by Reuters. This is, I think, where we might have read Nathan Lane here, in which a local Republican Party leader threatened to get a top county elections official fired or have her pay cut if she didn't give him unauthorized access to voting equipment. We read that story. In southern Michigan, a pro-Trump clerk who has expressed support for the QAnon conspiracy theory on social media defied state orders to perform maintenance on a voting machine on the unfounded belief that doing so could erase proof of an alleged fraud. In another Michigan case, a Republican activist impersonated an official from a made-up government agency in a plot to seize voting equipment. It's happening all over the place here. Some of the people and groups involved in the vigilante election investigator movement are drawing financial support from Lindell, the MyPillow Incorporated chief executive and one of the most visible backers of Trump's false fraud claims. Lindell said he hired 4 top members of one group, the U.S. Election Integrity Plan, or USEIP. The group got Lindell's backing about 3 months after its co-founder advised Elbert County Clerk Schroeder in his effort to copy and leak voting data. In all, Lindell told Reuters he had spent about $30 million and hired up to 70 people, including lawyers and, quote, cyber people, whatever that means, partly in support of Cause of America, a right-wing network of election activists. Lindell, who said he hasn't been involved in any data breaches, said he's just paying for them, said his quest aims to prove fraud in the 2020 vote and to reshape American elections by getting rid of electronic voting machines and returning to paper ballots. The Trump ally said his fraud claims will eventually be vindicated in spite of what he described as ridicule from the media. We've got to get rid of the machines, Lindell said. We need to melt them down and use them for prison bars and put everyone in prison that was involved with them. Okay, sure. A spokesperson for Trump did not respond to requests for comment, of course. Next up here, destroying voter confidence. 4 experts in voting law told Reuters the extent of these balloting data breaches is unprecedented in modern U.S. elections. The violations are especially worrying, say election officials, because they break the chain of custody. What? Over ballots and tabulating equipment. Such safeguards allow for the tracking of exactly who has handled sensitive voter data. They are essential to making elections secure and to resolving any challenges or fraud allegations. You need to make sure that those ballots are maintained under strict chain of custody at all times, said David Becker, executive director of the Nonpartisan Center for Election Innovation and Research. It's destroying voter confidence in the United States, which, many people will tell you that is the ultimate goal of all of this too. And, it may or may not be the case, but it's also great ammunition for self-fulfilling prophecies. I guess I would put it this way. If your conspiracy theory depends on being able to say that there's a secret cabal out there using electronic vote counting machines to steal votes for Biden or steal votes away from Trump or both, and the evidence is on the computers that run these things, of course, you'll ask for access to those computers, and the state will say no, because you're nobody, you're not entitled to that. And we are, of course, the state is trying to maintain the chain of custody so that if there ever was a legitimate inquiry, court sanctioned and everything, that said, all right, enough proof has been brought to bear that we do think there's a legitimate question. We want the hard drives of these machines copied and turned over to our custody for examination. If you did that, you would have to prove to the court that the chain of custody is established and unbroken. Who has had custody of these machines? Who made the last change to their software? Who used them last? All of that, so that you could, prove what was happening. Otherwise, it's all just guesses. And anybody could plant anything on those computers, right? So you need to preserve that chain of custody. However, whether you think you're telling the truth or not when you're circulating your conspiracy theory, if you know you're lying, but your claim to the court is, if we get to take a look at those hard drives, we'll find the proof that we need, you have several options open to you. If you can convince them to turn them over to you, or if you break in and steal them, right? It doesn't really matter, I guess, for your purposes, because you can either plant the stuff on there or become unsuccessful at planting the stuff on there. And when they catch you, then you say, the reason I broke in is because the state says they're maintaining the chain of custody in order to be able to prove or disprove these claims. But the truth is that while we're not looking, they're breaking in and erasing this stuff and then claiming that it's us that's breaking in and erasing it. And so you can see how this becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. Or if they manage to get a hold of these things, then they're of no use as evidence anymore because the chain of custody has been broken. And that's the sort of thing that these conspiracy theorists will point to and say, that's all legal mumbo jumbo. Now they say that even though the proof of the election fraud exists on these hard drives and for all to see, they say that this quote-unquote chain of custody problem means it's not admissible as evidence. But that's just a cover-up on their part, except it's actually, well, if it's anything, sometimes it's evidence of your tampering with the machines when you stole them. But that's the sort of thing that they would point to and say, they're using legal jargon to, a technicality to throw out the evidence of the clear fraud. And, there's nothing you can do about that. It's true that the evidence is being thrown out because the chain of custody has been disrupted. That's how you deal with evidence. Well, it sounds like mumbo jumbo to me, and that's enough for me, so therefore, whatever. And find a judge who looks up mumbo jumbo in the dictionary and gives you the decision you want, and I guess you're on the road to victory. That's the problem with all of this stuff. All right, back to the article, right? Such breaches can also constitute privacy invasions by exposing information about individual voters. The Colorado data Schroeder leaked likely included ballot images that show how people voted, according to the Secretary of State's office. If so, that would violate a core principle of modern American democracy, the secret ballot, which is intended to protect voters from politically motivated harassment or intimidation and to prevent vote buying. The secret ballot is a fundamental right in American elections, said Pamela Smith, president of Verified Voting, a nonpartisan group that advocates for secure elections. Maybe. The incidents examined by Reuters all took place in states that have been competitive in recent elections, 2 in Colorado, we know about the other one, 3 in Michigan, and 1 each in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. At least 5 of the cases are under investigation by local or federal law enforcement, with 3 arrests and 1 conviction, according to state and local officials. 4 of the breaches forced election officials to decertify or replace voting equipment that was no longer secure. So it's costing us money. The Federal Bureau of Investigation declined to comment, and you should make Mike Lindell pay for those new machines. The type of data leaked varies. In some cases, the full extent of the losses remains unknown. In Colorado's Mesa County, that's the one we originally heard about, the Secretary of State accuses Clerk Tina Peters of allowing an unauthorized person to make a, quote, forensic image of a voting equipment hard drive. In addition, confidential passwords required to upgrade the county's election software were published on the internet, according to an indictment from Peters. Like Schroeder, indictment of Peters, I should say. Like Schroeder, Peters said she was exercising her statutory duty to preserve election records. She accused Dominion and the Secretary of State, without evidence, of conspiring to destroy evidence of election fraud. In 3 other attempts, in Ohio's Lake County, Michigan's Cross Village, and North Carolina's Surrey County, no data is believed to have been accessed. In 2 other cases, Reuters was unable to determine what data, if any, was stolen. It's also unclear what data, if any, may have been accessed in Michigan's Adams Township, where a key component of an election tabulator machine went missing for 4 days in October of 2021. It was eventually found in the office of a clerk who has posted memes indicating support for QAnon and Facebook. QAnon, of course, is a conspiracy theory. You know all of that. I don't have to explain it to you. The rise of what election security officials describe as insider threats, office holders who leak confidential election data or sabotage voting machines, coincides with the national pressure campaign by Lindell-backed groups and other Trump allies who are traveling the country and lobbying local officials to replace electronic voting systems with hand-counted paper ballots, which, by the way, of course, would take much, much longer to count, and therefore when the count comes in, if it doesn't go their way, they say it took too long. That's prima facie evidence of fraud, as we claimed in 2020, and we need the results reversed. But this took so long because of what you asked for. So much the better, they say. The push comes ahead of the November midterm elections that will decide control of the U.S. Congress, now narrowly held by Democrats, and the 2024 presidential election, in which Trump has indicated he could seek a second White House term. County and town clerks are in the thick of things, in some cases as targets of the pressure, in other cases as the alleged actors. Clerks in the United States are often key election administrators in addition to managing vital records such as marriage licenses. And they don't do a good job with those either. See what happened in Kentucky way back when. The American rights fixation with voting machines intensified in the days after Democrat Joe Biden beat Trump. The defeated incumbent and his lawyers, including former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, started making outlandish claims of rigged machines. The accusations were soon deemed bogus by courts and Trump's own election security chief, and spurred ongoing defamation lawsuits against Giuliani and others from a prime target of the Trump campaign, voter machine provider Dominion Voting Systems. Dominion's machines have been the focus of multiple baseless election conspiracy theories, including that financier George Soros and the family of Venezuela's late socialist president Hugo Chavez conspired with Denver-based Dominion to steal the election. Dominion said statements by Lindell and others about Dominion have been repeatedly debunked, including by bipartisan government officials. Despite the lack of evidence, many Trump allies continue to insist that electronic voting machines were rigged in 2020 and argue for a return to paper ballots. Election officials of both parties warned such a change would make voting less secure. They say electronic voting machines provide more fraud safeguards than paper ballots by reducing human errors and preventing delays that could be exploited by bad actors seeking to block the certification results. And here, Reuters would be well advised to say, like, for instance, exactly what Donald Trump and his supporters did in 2020. They knew that there would be delays more than usual because of the COVID pandemic and planned ahead of time to claim that the delays were themselves evidence of fraud. They should just come out and say it, even though we all know it. They spent time explaining what QAnon is, and we all know that, so why not this? The most recent known attempted breach came in March when a county election director in North Carolina faced threats from a local Republican Party leader who demanded access to a vote tabulator, a machine which, by state law, may only be handled by election officials. William Keith Center, chair of the Surrey County Republican Party, remember this, told elections director Michaela Huff that he would have her fired if she didn't comply, the State Board of Elections told Reuters, which first reported the news of the incident on April 23rd. Center and a prominent election conspiracy theorist, Douglas Frank, met with Huff on March 28th, falsely claiming that a chip inside voting machines was used to rig the 2020 results. 2 days before, Frank had given a speech in which he espoused a number of debunked election conspiracy theories in Dobson, a town in the rural county of 72,000 people. Center and Frank did not respond to requests for comment. Huff refused Center's demands, made as a part of a push by local activists to conduct a, quote, forensic audit of the 2020 presidential results. During one encounter, the state board found Center told Huff, "I can't wait to watch you fall." The state board said it reported the threats against Huff to federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. No one has been charged in the matter. I can't wait to see Center fall, but no one will charge him. At one point, Center told Huff that the county sheriff, Steve Hyatt, would help him get the keys to the voting machines. Huff told the state board. Hyatt, a Republican, did not respond to requests for comment. Huff, a registered independent, said she was dismayed by the threats and spread of disinformation. She said her office must now prepare for voters who may refuse to insert their ballot into the tabulator in the false belief that the device will switch their vote. "I'm very concerned for the voters," Huff told Reuters. "Democracy starts here. It starts in our office," although that would be a great rumor to spread to Trump and Republican voters. If you agree to put your vote in the tabulator, it's just going to be switched. So don't do it. In fact, don't even go to the polls. Just think about who you want to win and hope telepathy does the trick. All right. To date, only one of the incidents has resulted in serious criminal charges over the voting data breaches. That's the case of Peters, the Mesa County clerk in Colorado. Peters, a Republican, was indicted in March on 7 felony charges, including attempted influence of a public servant, criminal impersonation, and identity theft, and 3 misdemeanors. The charges could carry a sentence of more than 25 years. Well, at last. She has not yet entered a plea. Her arraignment is scheduled for May 24th. Peters declined to comment, and she has previously said she is the victim of a partisan attack. In Cross Village, Michigan, Tara Jackson faced felony charges after she allegedly impersonated a government official working for a non-existent agency, the, quote, Election Integrity Commission, and convinced 3 men to access the town's vote tabulator on January 14th, 2021 and try to clone it, law enforcement officials show. She told an investigator she was trying to, quote, connect the dots on a theory that the county voting tabulator was rigged. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Let's continue reading through this lengthy Reuters report. I know it's going to preclude us from getting to other stories, like the very interesting story, for instance, that Marjorie Trader Greene is currently at war with the Catholic Church. That's interesting and fun to watch. Rooting for no one in that fight. Or I guess I should say particularly the particular institutions of the Catholic Church or those connected with it who are conducting the fight are of no interest to me. Can't pick a winner in that one. But there's a lot to get to. But that's what Friday shows are for. But this, I think, this is a lengthy article, and it really will eat up an awful lot of time. But I think it's important to keep abreast of these developments. And then maybe we'll see if we can get back to... I should have... I wish I had more time yesterday to read the Judge Ludwig article about his taking apart of their legal theories behind all this. Perhaps it's best to keep up with both of these things in preparation for this time and 2024 and stay abreast of developments and, I don't know, watch the whole country fall apart. Remember, though, we were just reading about Tara Jackson being charged in Cross Village, Michigan, for impersonating a government official and trying to get in and clone the vote tabulator's hard drive and, quote, connect the dots in all of this. So here she is trying to connect the dots, but, and that sounds like a good thing, except it's actually a crazy thing. So along comes the Emmett County prosecutor, but the prosecutor cuts a deal with Jackson, who in late February pleaded no contest to a single misdemeanor count of creating a disturbance. Why? The felony charges of fraud and unauthorized access to a computer were dropped. She served no jail time. Jackson did not respond to requests for comment. That's the most serious thing. She didn't respond to a request for comment. I can't believe it. But why let her off? I don't know. Gee whiz. The 3 men, a computer technician, I guess who she's working with here. I forget where the mention of the 3 men. Yes, right. She convinced 3 men to let her access the voting tabulator, saying she was with the Election Integrity Commission. The 3 men, a computer technician, a town trustee, and a former law enforcement officer who showed up with a bulletproof vest and a gun, talked their way past the town clerk. Oh, okay. So she convinced 3 men to go do the accessing, not that she talked their way past the 3 men. So these 3 guys show up and help her, talking their way past the town clerk, who claimed authority to inspect voting equipment. The computer technician opened parts of the tabulator and attempted to insert a flash drive into several ports, but it wouldn't fit. according to video footage taken by the three men and obtained by Reuters in a records request. At one point, the technician used pliers and then tweezers to extract a piece of plastic stuck in the machine, the video showed. So he's dismantling the thing. And who knows? I mean, on the one hand, it might have nothing to do with how you would extract data, but they don't really care to extract data because they were just making up what to do with the data as they go along anyway. But the other thing you could do is wreck the machine, and then your goal of wrecking all the machines is taken care of, right? I mean, that's another alternative. There's no downside to it. I got caught not knowing what the hell I was doing, so I wrecked the machine, and at least now these voting machines that I say are corrupt are not available for you to use for your further corruption or for any purposes, I guess. The men who did not respond to requests for comment believe they were part of an operation approved by the Department of Defense. Sure. According to body camera footage and interviews by sheriff's investigators. The town trustee told the investigators that Jackson said she was working with Sidney Powell, the pro-Trump lawyer who filed multiple unsuccessful lawsuits in the 2020 election, making wild and unfounded claims of voting fraud. But again, I jump out of the story here to point out, again, this is the unique danger of what Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell perpetrated here. Because they had access to getting on the airwaves, wearing suits and standing in close proximity to the President of the United States and claim these things, these idiots all over the country are able to convince themselves that they are acting on behalf of the Department of Defense. It's not, it's not just me being crazy saying I'm acting for the Department of Defense. You who don't know about this or might be skeptical of me, you saw with your own eyes, probably, the President of the United States stand with these people in suits and everything and proclaim this stuff being real. So it's probably not hard for those of you without, critical thinking skills or logic skills to come to the conclusion that, yeah, there might be an official sanction for this, even though it's just people speaking in their own personal capacity, but they hold on to these titles. So there must be something official about this, even though it, never occurred to you to ask, why is the president's power player here, one, having hair dye run down his face as he sweats his way through this press conference, and two, why are they having it in front of a landscaper in the outskirts of, was it Philadelphia where they did that one, or I don't remember. Anyway, none of that gives the game away for you, because these official people in suits and everything on television, you can't just get television cameras to cover you, Sure you can, but most people don't know that, and in the age of the internet, so long as there's a camera on your phone, I suppose, you can produce news, quote-unquote news. Wear a suit and anybody will believe you, I guess. All right, where were we? Right. The town trustee told investigators that Jackson said she was working with Sidney Powell. He bought that, I guess. Jackson told investigators that she had also been communicating with Phil Waldron, a retired Army colonel who worked with then-President Trump's outside legal team on election fraud claims. Emmett County Detective Matt Leirstein, L-E-I-R, Leirstein, I don't know, Leirstein probably, said investigators found no evidence of Powell and Waldron's involvement in the scheme. Powell and Waldron did not respond to requests for comment. They may or may not have been involved. You might be covering it up, but it might just be, I saw these people on TV, so I'm working with them. In my own mind, I'm working with them. And they're important people because they were on TV and they stood near a president. There you go. Some community members, including the township's Republican supervisor, have criticized the prosecutor for going too easy on Jackson and have called for others to be charged, including the three men who accessed the voting equipment. Yeah, why not? Almost everything doesn't add up, said the supervisor, Stephen Keller, of the sheriff's and prosecutor's handling of the case. That's a good point. Leirstein, the sheriff's detective, said he did not seek charges against the three men working with Jackson because he believed their stories that she had duped them. He said he did recommend charges against the town's former Republican clerk, Priscilla Sweet, who lost her position in the 2020 election. The prosecutor declined to pursue those charges, he said. Sweet was at the scene of the incident about the time law enforcement arrived, according to body cam footage reviewed by Reuters. The detective said Sweet told conflicting stories about how she knew it had happened. Phone records, he said, showed that Sweet and Jackson were in contact before the police were called to investigate. Sweet also admitted having told Jackson that she was concerned a pending voting system service would, quote, wipe the system of 2020 election data, according to a video of Learstein's interview of Sweet a few days after the breach. Sweet did not respond to requests for comment. Emmett County Prosecuting Attorney James Linderman did not respond to requests for comment on this story. Another breach came in Michigan's Adams Township, a rural area of about 2,000 people. Township Clerk Stephanie Scott, a Republican, is accused of resisting state orders to perform testing and maintenance on the machine, which she claimed would erase evidence of a potential fraud. At a town meeting in October, Scott said she wanted, quote, to find out what's on this machine before destroying anything, even though she wasn't destroying anything, adding, we need the proof. We can't just make accusations. Not that it dissuades her if she never gets the proof. On her Facebook page, Scott has expressed support for Trump, Lindell, and QAnon. And here's a picture of her being doofy right here. The Office of Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, sent a letter to Scott in October of 2021, pointing out that data from the November 2020 election was not even stored in the tabulator. Benson stripped Scott of her duties in October, citing her refusal to perform legally required maintenance needed to ensure the security and safety of the upcoming elections, according to a news release from Benson's office. And of course, what's her name? Scott here will say, well, sure, they say it was just maintenance, but it really was erasing the data that's on the machine. But the data was never on the machine, says Benson. That's what you say now, but I say it really was, and your quote-unquote maintenance is what erased it. Well, difficulty proving a negative once again. When Hillsdale County officials, acting on state orders, confiscated the town's tabulator, a crucial component called the scan unit, referred to as the brains of the device, was missing. That calls for dramatic music. Where could it be? State police, of course, did the next logical thing. They obtained a search warrant and recovered the part from Scott's office. Wow, she took it. Scott has not been charged for some strange reason. State police say their investigation into unauthorized tampering with the machine remains open. Meanwhile, the town has to spend $5,500 on a new tabulator now. By the time police came to execute the warrant, Scott was represented by Stephanie Lambert, a Detroit attorney who, along with Sidney Powell and other pro-Trump lawyers, tried unsuccessfully to overturn the state's election results, according to police records obtained in a police records request, or a public records request. Lambert, no response to request for comment. Scott declined to comment for the story. In February, she sued Benson and others in state court, claiming her powers were unconstitutionally usurped and that she had a duty to preserve election data under federal law, which she probably does. It's just that the data she thought she was preserving was never there in the first place. Okay. In Colorado, the breach of voter data came to light in early January when Elbert County Clerk Schroeder admitted to copying the hard drives in a lawsuit he joined with other Republican officials against Colorado's Secretary of State. The lawsuit argued that the company that tests Dominion election system software, V&V Incorporated, was improperly certified and that state authorities illegally destroyed election records, allegations that the state and the company deny. The suit also asserts Colorado's top election official, Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, exceeded her authority when she adopted emergency rules last year to prevent election audits that she considered partisan and illegitimate. The case is ongoing. So is the state's own lawsuit against Schroeder. In legal filings, the clerk admitted to making a copy of the county's election server's 2 hard drives on August 26th. He said he got help from Sean Smith, another retired Air Force colonel, Lots of colonels, a lot of Gaddafis running around here. And, of course, self-styled election fraud activist, but also help from Mark Cook, an IT specialist who supplied Schroeder with a digital forensic imager costing about $4,000 and capable of transferring data at high speeds. Maybe, whatever. What is this? Well, it's a high-speed digital forensic imager. Or it is just something I sold you for $4,000 which does nothing. Or it's something that actually plants a virus, a digital virus on the machines, or does the opposite of what I told you it's doing. You don't know. Just plug it in and then give me $4,000. Sounds like a good scam. I should do that. I'm going to tell people I sell low-cost digital forensic imagers. You want to do a forensic audit? Just open the machine and plug this in. It doesn't do anything, but you've paid me $3,000 for it. Anyway, both Smith and Cook then, quote, provided instructions as Schroeder worked to take the data, Schroeder testified. On September 2nd, he made a second copy of the hard drives. He said, we don't know whether he copied anything, but he thought he was copying things, but who knows what he was actually doing. Cook did not respond to a request for comment. Smith declined to comment. Secretary of State Griswold, a Democrat, opened a formal inquiry after discovering Schroeder's leak in January and sued the clerk on February 17th, seeking the return of the data. Schroeder said in written responses to the inquiry that he gave the copied hard drives to 2 attorneys, one of whom he refused to identify. The other, who I guess he did identify, is John Case, a longtime Colorado attorney who says on his website that he's dedicated to representing citizens, quote, petitioning for integrity, unquote, in elections. Case now represents Schroeder in the state lawsuit against him. Schroeder testified that he did not recall anyone asking him to copy the data. His decision to leak it to unauthorized lawyers, however, followed an intense effort to pressure county clerks across Colorado by an organization co-founded by Smith, one of the men who instructed Schroeder on how to copy the data. Smith's organization, the U.S. Election Integrity Plan, remember USEIP, emailed all 64 Colorado county clerks and visited at least 10 of them, including Schroeder, demanding they investigate unfounded allegations of 2020 voter fraud, according to Matt Crane, executive director of the Colorado County Clerks Association. Smith emailed Schroeder directly in early 2021, messages reviewed by Reuters show. In some communications, Smith shared a statistical analysis that purported to suggest that Biden had a suspiciously high number of votes in one precinct of majority Republican Elbert County. Colorado state officials said the county's votes were accurate. 4 of the emails from USEIP members and allies reviewed by Reuters referenced the debunked conspiracy theory about rigged voting machines from Dominion voting systems and asserted that clerks are legally bound to launch inquiries and preserve alleged evidence. You have an obligation to investigate this evidence and take the appropriate actions, read one message sent on March 15th. And who knows whether they have that responsibility or not, but it sounds truthy and legal, so some of them go along with it. The heat is more on Republican clerks, said Crane, a Republican who served as Arapahoe County clerk until 2018. They really look at us like traitors. In legal filings, Schroeder said he believed he had a, quote, statutory duty to preserve the 2020 voting records, and the information he copied should be legally public information, without detailing what the files contain. It's just somebody told me that I should say this legal-sounding thing, that it should be public information anyway. Well, do you really know anything about what you copied, or if you copied anything at all? No. So then why do you say it's legally public information? Because that's what I heard. Well, who'd you hear it from? A guy with a suit who said he was working with Sidney Powell, who said she was working with the president, who said he was not a crazy idiot and knew what was going on. So you see, why I would think this. Case, the lawyer, right? I skipped something here. He thought he had the statutory duty to preserve the voting records, but he didn't know what he copied and couldn't tell anybody what the files actually contained. In court filings, Schroeder said that he was careful to, quote, preserve chain of custody with the data that he gave the attorneys, asserting on February 3rd that he copied hard drives, the copied hard drives remained in, quote, sealed containers. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but the fact that he was accessing it was the breach of custody. Anyway, he said the lawyers who took possession of the data, including the attorney representing him, Case, told him no one had accessed it. So there you go, chain of custody. He told me no one accessed it. But do you believe him? Yes, but I have no proof that it's true. Case declined to comment. He referred questions to USEIP co-founder Holly Kassun, K-A-S-U-N, who he described as his, quote, media consultant. Kassun did not answer questions about Case's involvement in the data leak. Schroeder said he feared a state-ordered upgrade to the voting system would erase records relating to the 2020 election. State officials, however, said the 2020 election records would be retained after the upgrade. So I guess you could, at best, say, well, that's a he said, she said situation. No charges have been filed against Schroeder or others involved in the breach of the voting system. The county's district attorney's office declined to comment. Elbert County Sheriff Tim Norton said his office had not investigated the incident, which he said was being, quote, handled by the state. A Colorado State Patrol spokesperson, Sergeant Troy Kessler, said the state police do not handle election matters. So nobody knows if anything's being investigated. Isn't that great? Only Reuters is investigating. 3 months after Schroeder leaked the data, USEIP's members landed Lindell as a financial backer. The pillow magnate reached out to USEIP and said the group's work in Colorado was great. Kassun, who co-founded the organization with Smith, said in an interview. A lot of he said, she said there too. He said it was great, but that doesn't matter. There's no she in this. Anyway, 4 USEIP members, including Smith, met with Lindell in Colorado Springs late last year and presented their work, which was great. A subsequent meeting a few weeks later, Kassun said Lindell told the group, let's scale. Let's do exactly what you're doing with USEIP. Everybody scale. In other words, do it in more places, I guess. Business lingo. The 4 activists joined Lindell as full-time employees, which is good because they should get fired as town clerks. Lindell confirmed in an interview with Reuters that this arrangement had taken place. They now lead the Lindell-backed Cause of America, which coordinates a nationwide network, maybe, of right-wing election activists. We talk to him every day, Kassun said of Lindell. We keep him updated on what we're doing. He also counsels us on how to run things. He offers us what we need to ramp up. Since joining Lindell, Smith has remained at the forefront of Colorado's election conspiracy activism. At a February 10th event held in a Colorado church, Smith publicly threatened Griswold, saying, if you're involved in election fraud, as I am, then you deserve to hang, as you do. Griswold, who did not attend the meeting, said she would not be intimidated. These threats are being fueled by extreme elected officials and political insiders who are spreading the big lie that the 2020 vote was stolen to further suppress the vote, destabilize American elections, and undermine voter confidence, she said in a statement. Lindell told Reuters that Cause of America is just a small part of his overall effort to prove the 2020 election was stolen and to change election results. He said he funds South Dakota registered Cause of America and pays other election-focused employees through Lindell Management, a Minnesota-based LLC registered in 2018. I have over probably 50 to 70 people that I pay. That's good and precise. That all they're doing is on this election, Lindell, age 60 apparently, said in the interview. I guess Cause of America would be a little piece of that. The group helps connect other groups with lawyers, the same lawyers over and over again who lose every case. Lindell, who says he is a former cocaine addict and attributes his reform to his Christian faith, has said he believes God chose Trump to be president, and also does a lot of cocaine. Now Lindell says God endorses his pursuit of election fraud claims. God has given me an amazing platform, he said. I'm using it the best I can. Lindell has publicly praised Tina Peters, the Republican clerk of Colorado's Mesa County, who has been charged in connection with one of the most invasive breaches of voting systems. In an interview, Lindell said of the allegations against Peters, she backed up her computers. She did her job. He told Reuters he was paying her legal fees. I'm sure it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, he said. In a subsequent interview, however, Lindell said he was mistaken. I thought I put money towards it, but I never had, because he's so organized and knows what he's doing. A lawyer for Peters, Harvey Steinberg, did not respond to a question about who was paying him, if anybody, I guess. Schroeder wasn't the only Colorado clerk approached by USEIP's Smith for access to secure voting data. In May of 2021, Smith told El Paso County Clerk Chuck Broerman in a meeting that USEIP would conduct a, quote, forensic investigation of his voting systems, Broerman said. Clerk Broerman, who will do this either with you or through you, Broerman recorded. Okay, I see. I'm sorry, not who, but we. So Broerman says he recalls them saying, Clerk Broerman, we will do this either with you or through you. Smith was the one who told him this. USEIP workers have also harassed Colorado voters in a door-to-door campaign, according to a lawsuit filed in March by the NAACP and other rights groups. Some USEIP workers impersonated government authorities from, quote, the county, wearing badges and carrying guns, because anybody can have those, as they interrogated voters, quote, about their addresses, whether they participated in the 2020 election, and if so, how they cast their vote, the suit alleges. So, secret ballot for no one, because we're pretending to be law enforcement officers on the side of the law, which we're not. But we think we are, because I like to think I'm a patriot. That's why I buy freeze-dried food. It all works out. USEIP did not respond to a request for comment on the allegations. The organization has sought to have the lawsuit dismissed, arguing it is speculative and without merit. Those are two legal-sounding things that you can say, and on TV sometimes it works, but apparently not yet in real life. Schroeder, who described himself as a self-employed entrepreneur, became clerk in this rural, heavily Republican county in 2013. So, what do you do for a living? I'm the town clerk. But how do you describe yourself? Oh, I'm self-employed. No, you're not. You're employed by the county. Anyway, the area's about 27,000 residents in 2020 overwhelmingly backed Trump, who took 74% of the votes here. Political signs such as Trump Country, and this is an interesting one. There's a picture of this one. Eat meat, vote Republican, dot the town of Kiowa, with a population of about 750. Eat meat, vote Republican. And there's a picture of a steak. And I know what they think they're doing, but that's kind of odd. So I think they should get rid of the AT there. Eat me, vote Republican is what it should say. I don't know why they think that works. Let's wind up this article and get the hell out of here. Much of Elbert County supports Schroeder, according to interviews with local officials. The county's Republican chair, Tom Peterson, and two county commissioners defended him. Dallas is a highly respected clerk, said Peterson. He also repeated the false theory that the state upgrade would erase election data. Schroeder isn't letting the state's secretary's investigation slow him down. He is campaigning for higher office in November, asking voters to elect him to the county commission. How fun. And then Reuters wraps things up with a infographic here. Rage against the voting machines. Reuters identified the 8 locales where pro-Trump activists have breached or tried to breach the voting system. 5 are detailed in this article. Here is a look at the other 3. The other 3, by the way, as we get set to exit the show for the day, are in Fulton County, Pennsylvania, a breach on December 31st of 2020. Then Lake County, Ohio, attempted breach on May 4th, Star Wars Day, on 2021, and of course, Richfield Township in Roscommon County in Michigan. Breach, it says here, not applicable. I think they found this guy out before they went ahead and do it. Attempted it. All right. So 3 infographics will describe some of that. I don't have the time for today to get through any of these 3, but they are there for your review. Time now, of course, to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I believe he'll have a different focus for today. I don't know. It was an awful lot of time to spend on this thing, but very important to get some sense of how crazy some of the people are, how much of this is self-fulfilling prophecy, how much of this is total garbage, how much of this is just throwing around legal mumbo-jumbo and thinking it makes you sound like you know what you're talking about. I don't know. We'll return to that theme if we get to read Luddig's article tomorrow on the air, but in the meantime, like I said, handing it off to Justice Putnam for his roundup of the news, both domestic and international, as always. Coming up next, right here on Netroots Radio. Let me see if I can grab a juicy nugget to share with you after this.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
How about this one? Millionaire candidates and billionaire investors are, of course, pouring in the money into, pouring big bucks into winning Republican primaries for open U.S. Senate seats, particularly in Ohio and Pennsylvania. 2 places where some of these voter breaches have taken place. Weird.